This is a drop tube. Now, a drop tube is typically used when assembling black powder cartridges. And the way it's used is you take your case and you put it down here, and you take your powder charge and you pour it in here, and the powder travels down the tube, hopefully at some kind of vortex action, and lands in the cartridge and fills it up and compacts nice. And a lot of people seem to think that these make all the world of difference. Now, I can't really speak as to if they really make all the difference in the world as far as accuracy or consistency, but my regulars might know and notice that I don't typically use one of these. So I'm not going to argue that they are or aren't effective as far as accuracy goes. I do know folks that use these for silhouette shoots when they do 800 and 1,000 yards and stuff. And they use these to load their black powder cartridges, and they will swear on a stack of Bibles that it makes all the difference. So I'm inclined to take their word for it. But I've found that a lot of people seem to think that a drop tube is like a magic wand.
No, no, definitely not.
Where if you use this, you'll be able to get a whole bunch more powder into a case. And I've discovered this recently because I've gotten a lot of comments on the last video I did, which was the Black Powder 303, where I squeezed 71.5 grains of powder into that case. Now, the way I did it is I filled the case up with 55 grains, which is right up to the top of the case, and then I compressed the powder. I'd put in 5 grains and I'd compress it again, pull the bullet, put in 5 grains, compress it, and I did that until all 71.5 grains were in there. And I've gotten dozens and dozens of comments from people that say, if you were using a drop tube, you wouldn't have to do that. Well, the problem is that's not really how it works. Drop tubes basically operate off of gravity. You're funneling the charge into the case, and it has enough time to gather some speed as it lands in the cartridge. But they're not going to allow you to get 10 or 15 grains. In fact, in my experience, a drop tube really only compacts the powder enough to get about 3 grains worth of powder more into that case. Now, again, I can't speak for every cartridge or every circumstance, but in this particular case with the Black Powder 303 with 71.5 grains, this doesn't really work. Let me show you why. All right, so here we have a primed and ready 303 British case. For this, we're going to use 3F. I have my scale zeroed out there, and this should be roughly 60 grains. Half a grain shy. Okay. Now, when I first tried this, my first attempt at this, I used 55 grains of 2F. And it came right up to the top of one of these 303 cases. So here we have 60.1. I think that's close enough. And we're going to use the drop tube. And I'll show you how this goes. So here's our drop tube. Here's our cartridge. And we're going to use this funnel here, but you'll see why in a minute. So we're going to put that there. Put our drop tube there. There appears to be something at the bottom of that one. Now we're going to take our charge and we're going to pour it in there. Now, I want to show you that even though we use that drop tube, that charge is still not all pushed in there. Still see it's over the top a little bit. And that's only 5 grains more than I used in the initial test with 55 grains. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my vibrating case tumbler to try and vibrate it down and get it to sink down in there. All right, here goes. Well, it's a little over the top, but it is in there. All right, now let's just weigh it and see if we lost any. Oh, 59.8. So that's 3/10, I think. Oh, 59.9. 2/10. Yeah, that's pretty good. So what this looks like to me is the vibrating case tumbler is much, much more effective at settling that powder than this thing is. Now, for those of you that did watch that video, I would like to remind you that even though I had to do some strange things with compressing the powder, it seemed to perform pretty well. The 1F definitely grouped the best. The 4F did, I've had better. But as far as the spread and the velocity goes, they were all very consistent. Now, as far as the drop tube goes and that particular video, I had plenty of people that said, well, even if you weren't going to be able to squeeze 15 grains more with this, it still would have saved you some time. Well, it doesn't look like that to me. Now, if you were going to use the drop tube and the case tumbler, then yeah, you could squeeze 5 more grains in there. That's it. Now, I had to compress it, I think, 5 times total, I think is what it was. So it would have saved me, because it was 5 grain increments to compress that stuff, would have saved me 1 time pressing it on the press. But instead, I would have had to use this and then take it over to my tumbler and then vibrate all the stuff down to get it compacted. So as far as it saving any time, absolutely not. Either you spend time using this in the tumbler or you just compress it one more time. About compressing it, I had some people say, you know, why didn't you just turn down a brass dowel and pour it in there and then compress it by hand until you got it all in there 5 grains at a time? And the reason why I didn't want to do that, I did it on the press specifically like that, is because I got even compression each time. If I was just going to pour 55 grains in there and then put a brass dowel in there and hit it with a hammer until it was compressed, I'm not going to get even compression from round to round, and it's not going to be as accurate. It's going to have wider spread. So I know it might seem tedious, and that's most certainly because it was, but that way actually worked pretty damn well. I'm still trying to come up with a way of making a solid puck with the hole through the middle for the flash hole, but that's a whole nother topic. Actually, you know what? Something else I'm thinking of as far as the drop tube goes is I've heard people say that you can't fit 70 grains of powder in a 4570 case without a drop tube. So let's give that a try. All right, so here we have 3F 70.1 grains. And here we have our 4570 case. And here's our drop tube. I know you can't see me doing it up here. Whoa, that's really dangerous. Let's, ow, I don't have my other thing out. Nope, we'll just go dangerous. Now here's our charge. Okay. Now there's 70 grains using the drop tube. Now let's try it without the drop tube. 70.2. There's our funnel, 4570. I won't even tap it. There it is right there. So, one with and without. Now, is there a little bit of a difference? Yeah, there most certainly is. But I'm here to tell you that's not even 5 grains worth of difference. It's probably closer to 3. So does using a drop tube make a difference in how the powder is compacted in a case? Yeah, it certainly looks that way. Is it a tremendous difference that's worth 15 or 20 grains? No. In fact, I'd be surprised if it was 5 grains. Let's see. So here we have our 2 cartridges. This one right here, we just use the funnel. This one here, we use the drop tube, and you can see it is slightly more compact. So now, let's just put 2 or 3 grains in here and see about how much. We'll use 3 grains because that is my hypothesis, is it's really only worth about 3 grains. Oh, well, I guess I should use the drop tube if I'm going to make it fair, right? If I could do this without spilling it all over the place. All right, here we go. What do you think about that? That looks pretty even to me. In fact, maybe if I flatten that out just a little bit, that's practically the same. So, again, the drop tube is really only worth about 3 grains. Now, one of my all-time favorite things to do when it comes to making videos is busting black powder myths. And I don't hear this one too often, but I have heard people say it, that you have to use a drop tube in order to fit 70 grains of powder in a 4570 case. Now, you saw how much room there was with just the funnel, no drop tube, plenty of room. And I've loaded them like that for a long time with a 405 grain bullet, and they perform just fine. With 3F even too, which is something else they tell you you're not supposed to do. But either way, works fine. So again, all the drop tube is really worth as far as the amount of compression is about 3 grains. Now, I don't mean to pick on anyone. If you like the drop tube or you use it in all your black powder cartridges and it works well for you, that's great. My point is simply that it's not so efficient where you're going to be able to shove 15 more grains of powder into whatever case you're loading. It doesn't work that good. But the case tumbler seems to do a much, much better job. So I think what I'll do next time, maybe we'll do this with 4570, is we'll try some rounds that were loaded, assembled, with the charge tube versus some that weren't, and see if there's any big variation in accuracy or max spread. I think that'd be interesting to do. Let me know if you want to see that kind of stuff. So, as usual, folks, if you thought this video didn't suck, do me a favor and hit the like button and consider subscribing. And if you did think it sucked, go make your own damn video.